Ну що, шановні колеги,
Dear colleagues, we start our press conference today. We thank Ukraine Crisis Media Center that hosted us today in order to hold press conference on this important topic. The topic of this press conference, as you saw in the announcement, is what do Ukrainians know and think about NATO today. We decided to consider this issue in detail, not only statistical issues. This you can find in many other organizations who hold these statistical surveys. We want to go into the motivational aspects of support or opposition and to discuss the opinions of people. And I believe you will be interested in this discussion because we have experts who deal with this issue. I would like to introduce our speakers. Today we're having Barbora Maronkova, Director at NATO Information and Documentation Center in Ukraine. Thank you for being with us today. Serhiy Verbytskyi and his position is really long. Deputy Head of Section for Defensive Ministry Cooperation with NATO Government Office for European and Euro-Atlantic Integration. Thank you, Serhiy, for being with us today. Ms. Hopko, MP, Independent Deputy Head of Interparliamentary Group, Ukraine-NATO. And this is not only position, but we put this position here because it refers to our topic. And Serhiy Dzherdzh, Head of Public League Ukraine-NATO, Deputy Head of Public Council at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Ukraine. And I would like to say that our meeting is supported by the Public Council of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. And we are going to start, and we are going to proceed to the results of our research. This is a new research. We make it public for the first time in October 2018. We held this survey, and it is representative for all the regions except Crimea and Lugansk and occupied territories of Lugansk and Donetsk Oblast. The error is 2.3%. So the first issue, the first question, what option of guaranteeing of security would be the best for Ukraine? We asked this question for many years, and you may see this on the screen. Unfortunately, our speakers do not see it, but they can see this data in the table. Starting 2017, we see this graph, this dynamics of support, and we see those big transformations that happened in the public opinion starting 2012. And now, and we see that in this period, what happened, so there was powerful falling of the support. First, it was the leader of public opinion, the first place, and the support of NATO was lagging behind. This was the less popular idea. And then the situation transformed dramatically, and you may see the level of support increased more than 3 times. If in 2012 it was 13%, and in May 2014 it was 33%, and now, as of August 2018, about 42% of people support NATO as the best guarantee of support for Ukraine, of security support. So this is the correct data, and we may consider it from both sides. So we considered this issue during other round tables, and in 2017 we had 47% who supported NATO, and at the same time we see that there is a base support, and the level of volatility is not big. We see that this is about 42%, plus minus 3%. So we have the support of NATO, and we believe that this will continue. So we believe that this is, we hope that this is irreversible process, but we understand that there can be other trends, but we have such a trend now. You may see also how starting 2015, there's dynamic increase of the support of non-allied status. And we recorded this data, the level of support of non-aligned status, at the level of 35% as of August 2018. In 2015, we had 23, so we see increase here. But we should say that this option of guaranteeing of security, it is supported in the south and in the east, not in other regions. The same in the other regions. The support of NATO is bigger in the west and in the south and in the north, and 71% is in the west, and you see you may see from this graph that the vector of the military union with Russia, it is well forecast. After military aggression by Russia, this vector was falling down, and this indicator is at the level of 6%. So the issue that is raised often is the issue of referendum and whether people are ready to take part. We ask people about this, and we see that the level of readiness to participate in this referendum is rather high, and this is more than 60%. The latest shows 66%, and this August survey showed that 63% of citizens would take part in this referendum. The highest hypothetical turnout would be in the west and the lowest in the east regions. Kharkiv, Dnipropetrovska oblast, Zaporizhska oblast, and in this Donbas, we joined this data. So we see at the same time that in 2012, 6 years ago, the results, we see that at this referendum, if we had it now, out of those who came, if we select select out those people who wouldn't come, those who would come, more than 60%, 67% would voted for, and 20 would voted against. So before we had 61 against and only 26 for. So we have regional differences between the regions, and western and northern regions are more pro-NATO, and the eastern and southern regions are lagging behind. But if we operate this data, this threshold between the year 2013, we see that at that stage, before the aggression, the discrepancy between the West and the East, this difference was catastrophic. And these were really small numbers in the East and in the South and in the East. and now it is about 21%. So also we are speaking about motivation. In order to build communication campaign efficiently, we should understand what attracts those who are proponents of NATO and what why people oppose. So the main argument for NATO for people is that membership in the alliance will provide security guarantee for Ukraine. Also important motive is that membership will allow to oppose Russian aggression. 34% believe so, and this will allow to modernize Ukrainian army, 31%. So these are not absolute figures, but this is a survey of the respondents. These are percentage of those people who said that they support NATO, and we asked them why you support NATO. So they provided such motivation, key motivation for them. So negative attitude towards NATO, it is motivated first of all, and we see it in our previous surveys as well, that it can that Ukraine will participate in the conflicts of NATO, and also 38% are still appeal to traditional Soviet ideological cliche that NATO is perceived as aggressive imperialistic bloc, and 38% believe so, and 33%, the same 33% say that they have such belief that Ukraine should be non-aligned state. In the overall perception, when we ask about the associations with NATO, whether it is defensive or peacekeeping organizations or aggressive bloc, we see that a majority, relative majority, believe that NATO, first of all, is a defensive union. 15% believe that this is peacekeeping organization, and 29% believe that this is aggressive military bloc. And in 2007, this issue was put long time ago. We have the data for 2002, and there was 50% of support of this idea. So this is a big figure. And if you look at this table, in December 2002, so the same number as in August 2018, they believe that this is aggressive military bloc. First, this percentage rose, then it fell. So there are elderly people, people who were taught in Soviet schools, and so in 15 years, the number of people who share this opinion, it should have fallen. So we see that there is a fall or decrease or increase. So this is the issue of this is the ideological issue, not the issue of awareness. Why people provide such an opinion. That's why we should consider such issues properly, and I would like our speakers to comment on this later. So the main function of NATO, what NATO is, and how it was started as the Union of Common Security. So this is the defense of the countries, and 37%, the majority of our respondents, know about the main function of NATO. Also 27% believe that this is fight with international terrorism, and 25% see the NATO as the instrument of influence of the United States on political processes in the world and in Europe. Traditionally, we ask about how the decisions are taken in NATO. So whether they know how the decisions are taken. about each fifth, they provide proper answer that the decisions of NATO are taken by consensus when every country agrees. So others believe that this is done by the majority, 22%, and some people believe that they have some hierarchy and old members decide. And in this research, we see the increase of the part of those people who rejected to provide answer to the questions. They do not know how the decisions are made. It is difficult for them to say. These were 45%, and in June 2017 we have 34% of such people. So people see that there's some problem in this question. They do not want to respond. So the highest awareness is in the West and in the North, and the people are aware how decisions are taken. At the same time, in the South and in the East, the majority, more than 60%, they rejected this to answer this question, about 65%. 11% believe that they are well informed, 55% believe that they know something, but in their opinion, not enough. And 20%, they say they do not know anything. So there's request for information about NATO. At the same time, they see that 14% of citizens, they see in the information sphere lack of materials about NATO, that there are a lot of materials about NATO. They say that information is enough. And in the center and in the West, they have a lot of information, and in the East and in the South, they say that information is lacking. The 38% believe that there are some publications and films about NATO, but they are rare. And 21% say that there's no information campaign about NATO, and the majority of them are in the East. So this issue revealed that the East is the problematic region in the assessment and in awareness and what information they consume. And also some people are not interested. They are closed for this information. These are 20%. So the most interesting topics about NATO, and we discussed in previous research, people want to know information about NATO that concerns Ukraine, positive and negative consequences of accession to NATO. There can be analytical materials and other things. So accession to NATO and how it will influence the level of life and the spectrum of reform, democratization, and it also plays an important role, and people have requests to get information about this influence on economy of Ukraine and international investment. We know that countries that are protected by NATO, they get more investment. This is known, and also possibility to establish peace in Donbas. This is the key problem, the key issue for the citizens, and also the possibility to modernize Ukrainian armed forces. So we see such assessment of people, such important trends, and I would like to give the floor to Mr. Serhiy Dzherdzh in order that he shared his opinion and assessment. How do you perceive this data, whether you see some threatening trends?
Thank you very much for giving me the opportunity to speak. In the regions, we see very high interest to the NATO topic, this Russian-Ukrainian war, which has been on for 4 years, is the ground facilitating that people become more interested in the topic of NATO and topic of security. So the concept of raising public awareness, which has has been adopted by the government and supported by international institutions will give good results soon and will influence positively the perception of NATO in the provinces, in the provincial areas. So talking with journalists about the facts of cooperation in military aspects, economic aspects, and security aspects is important. We have 16 trust funds operating. 8 of them are working with Ukraine. Out of the countries getting support from these funds is Armenia, Montenegro, Serbia, and including Ukraine. All those countries, NATO countries, provided 74 million euros, including 39 to Ukrainian. 39 millions to Ukrainian funds. That is 39% of all the total amount. So this is big assistance, and this is what we really want to see from NATO. This is practical assistance, practical support. We are indeed interested in this, and the trends of our political opponents. They also stir up the NATO topics. I do not see it as election campaign, presidential and parliamentary campaign. I want them not to use the topic of NATO. Ukraine has already decided on the pro-NATO vector, and this vector is legalized in the document, and we also know that there are expectations that the constitution will contain this statement of Ukrainian pro-NATO vector. So political parties and movements are better not to compete using this NATO topic. Let them choose other topics for debates during the electoral campaign, because otherwise using the topic of NATO will have destructive influence, and this will push out the international institutions helping us now. Thank you, Mr. Serhiy. We cannot force our politicians to stop talking about NATO in their political debates, and we cannot stop them. That is why we have the out of bloc, the non-aligned status support rising in Ukraine. I'm giving the floor to Ms. Barbora so that she say her opinion. We saw some shocked figures as to the segment of people who still have ideological cliches in their attitudes to NATO, and we saw that there are differences in public awareness by regions. Do you have any difficulties in working in the east regions of Ukraine, and why these differences are present? Thank you. I will be speaking in English.
Хочу слухати, пані Барбора буде.
Well, first of all, thank you for this very detailed sociological research. I think it provides us with a lot of food for thought and a lot of useful information that can navigate the work of my center, the NATO Information Documentation Center, but also of our Ukrainian partners, be it at the governmental level or also the non-governmental level. I myself have worked with public diplomacy and public opinion on behalf of NATO for 12 years now. In many countries, those that were entering NATO, particularly in the Western Balkans, Albania, Croatia, Montenegro, and it's very interesting to see the differences between different countries and their opinion about what added value is it for me to enter NATO, or what do I think about NATO. And while there are some overarching similarities, every country has a different history, different geography, different experience with NATO, and that pretty much affects also the thinking of people in relation to our organization. I am also particularly happy about the results from the regions, because we believe that Kiev is Kiev, but the rest of Ukraine is very different in their thinking about what is NATO or European Union. Of course, these questions for average citizens are not on their daily agenda, so to speak. As you already said, it's economic interest, it's how to make a living, how to fight corruption on your daily life. So we fully understand that discussing NATO is not something what an average family will do in Sumy or in Mykolaiv. But at the same time, I think we do have some positive results over the years. As you have seen from in the fact sheet that you received, we do have some improved understanding about the basics of what is NATO, about how NATO works and what it means to become a member. But we still have a lot of work to do. There are a lot of myths and stereotypes in the Ukrainian society which are inherited from the time of the Soviet Union, perhaps fed over the last 20 years by different political forces. And let's be very honest here, we also have a very strong Russian propaganda against NATO, not just in Russia, but also in countries like Ukraine, Moldova, Georgia, Belarus, but even in our own NATO member states. So we have this big phenomena of very aggressively pushing some of the stereotypes. And I looked at the words that were used in your research by your respondents, and I counted words such as agresivny, blok, військовий, imperialistyczny. These 4 words are over and over and over being reflected in the answers of the citizens. And whilst I'm not a historian or a sociologist or a Sovietologist or any of that, for me the word imperialistyczny really is connotated with the old days. And I'm quite fascinated to still see in 2018 people using this word. So this to me shows that the old stereotypes are still very much ingrained in people's conscience, in people's thinking. What we would like to see, I'm not going to be too optimistic to say next year, but hopefully in a couple of years, I would like to see the following keywords by the respondents. Alliance, which comes from the word allies, political military organization, and collective security. So hopefully together, all of us as NATO Information and Documentation Center, our friends and partners from the government level, from the political sphere, from the NGO sector, and you journalists, we can work together in changing these words into alliance and political, military, and collective security, and hopefully not to see the words agresivny, imperialistyczny, військовий blok anymore. Thank you.
Дякую, пані Барборо.
Thank you, Ms. Barbora, for your speech. I would like to explain a little bit. The dynamics was of interest for us. We started our polls 15 years ago, so to see this dynamic, we use this definition, aggressive imperialistic bloc, but for some people they really still have such opinion, and these values, they are retranslated from older generation to younger generation. And I know that information and documentation center have been performing lots of public awareness and education activities. I would like to remind that this poll covers the population in the group 18 plus, and the youngest generation, the teenagers, they will soon get this group in next few years, so the dynamics should be improved, I think, in the next few years. Thank you, Ms. Barbora. I would like to move to more specific data. The process of Euro-Atlantic integration is a complex process which has practical dimensions in many sectors, and the document annually approved by the President, which gives guidelines, next steps that will let us approach NATO. This is annual national program, so we invited Mr. Verbytskyi from the Office on Euro-Atlantic Integration. He will cover the topics whether the implementation of annual 2018 national program is successful. Thank you. Good afternoon. I would like to thank the Democratic Initiatives Fund and UCMC for the invitation to this briefing, where we can cover the aspects of our cooperation with NATO. I would like to return to the data you have voiced out as to the percentage of people who support the accession at the representative of state body in charge of Ukraine-NATO integration. I would like to hear more and to have larger percentage for Ukraine-NATO integration. So the percentage which support, which is positive to Ukraine's accession to NATO. There is 42% of population which provides stable support to Euro-Atlantic cause of Ukraine. This figure, it has not changed with time much, so we have already achieved the understanding of a high percentage of Ukrainian citizens of our cause, thanks to state organizations and NGOs activities on public awareness as concerns annual national program Ukraine-NATO. When I speak and I first gives the definition of this document, what is its importance. Annual national program is not the cooperation document between Ukraine and NATO. This is a document regulating our activities, the roadmap for Ukrainian side, where the measures and initiatives are listed which we implement so that we approach our accession to NATO, so that we bring up our standards to those requested by NATO from us. This is the mechanism. There is a mechanism regulated by NATO documents for approval of such annual programs. For example, this week we start the first action on this national program on appraisal of Ukraine-NATO program implementation in 2018. We will start evaluating the program, which is well known and is a part of our program. This is the transparency, impartiality and corruption risk combating program. This program will be evaluated along with our partners from the Alliance this week. And this will be the start of the evaluation cycle of the results of national program implementation. Talking about the statistics, I would like to tell you about the dynamics from 2016. In 2016, the quantitative indicators were 255 measures were implemented in 2016. We had 375 actions implemented, and this year we have already implemented 444 actions. Our strategic goal is not to attain quantitative indicators, but to attain qualitative indicators, because the content of the program of different initiatives, they differ. For example, if we have implemented some event, we can report that we have attained the goal, but the goal is to have some comprehensive measures implemented, such as guaranteeing the standards of Ukrainian military programs consistent with NATO standards. We have been working on this. Member countries of NATO, they join this standard, and the partner country can also join this program and make its products consistent with NATO standards. This is an example of the level of complexity of initiatives which are on the annual national program. The content of the program is regulated by NATO guidelines. The first section is political and economic issues. The second is and fifth, legal issues. What we change in the program next year? We change the order of developing this program. It will be drafted according to the amendments which are now pending in the presidential administration of Ukraine, and we hope that the president will soon adopt the decree next year. We will improve the structure of the program in terms of evaluation and monitoring of the program implementation. We try to use NATO tools better, such as comprehensive set of documents, planning of forces, and evaluation of forces. In our opinion, as developers, the structure will outline more strictly the goals and evaluation and monitoring of the attainment of the goals. So we will trace the program as to the extent of harmonization of our program with the strategic bulletin of NATO, which also regulate the cooperation between Ukraine and NATO. The accent will be on the results, but not on the number of events held. We will improve the quality, not the quantity of the events, and the system of monitoring and evaluation is the most important goal we are now emphasizing while drafting the program for the next year. Thank you, Mr. Serhiy, for your explanation of the context of the document, the annual national program. And I would like to give the floor to the Member of Parliament, Olena Hopko, so that she covers the political processes. We see that the topic of NATO and Euro-Atlantic integration is again on the agenda in the new political season. How you, as a Member of Parliament, see the prospects, whether this is the start of election campaign, is it a logical step?
Thank you very much. First of all, it's really pleasant that today Fund of Democratic Initiatives present this survey, and we see positive data that are of importance as to understand the support of NATO by population, and also this change in public opinion. After start of Russian aggression in 2014, now we see some stability. At the same time, the slow level of support in the south and in the east compared with the west and the north. It shows that in the east and in the south there is efficient Russian propaganda. In the east and the south, people of pension age, they associate NATO with aggressive bloc, imperialistic one. That's why I would like to call on our partners to invest more resources and to deliver awareness campaigns, mostly in the east and in the south. As the member of committee, I visited Kherson, Odessa, not only about NATO, but also about EU, and there are some concerns because of deterioration of security situation in the Azov Sea and economic blockade of ports, stopping of vessels. We clearly understand what will be the escalations in the military sphere and the deterioration of conditions in the Azov and Black Sea area. So this issue of non-allied status, this trend increases. This is the consequence of the activity of Putin's, I call them not media, but people of Russian tanks and weapons. They just go through the minds of people, and the National Defense and Security Council. And I do not attend some TV channels, some programs, because some of them try to manipulate people's opinions that it was not Russia who attacked us, and this is the hybrid war of information propaganda, hybrid war of Russia. They have pro-Russian media, the owners are puppets of Kremlin, Medvedchuk, and others, and they try to make situation more difficult. So there should be changes to constitution, and 226 votes that are planned for 20th of September. We go through committees now, and on the 20th we will introduce this document. We need 226 votes, and there should be consensus of the coalition and opposition. We have a lot of oppositions, but I hope that we will have 300 votes. And by example of some Baltic states, they provided this into constitution. They established this way to NATO, to EU, not to have reverse trend, and it took rather a lot of time. And I understand that we can introduce changes to constitution, but we should put these steps into practice. And one of the issues was how the decisions are taken in NATO. They are taken by consensus, and in Brussels lately, one more member was introduced, and there's a policy of open doors, and it really works. And despite lasting Russian aggression, Ukraine has all the chances. For NATO, we would be a powerful partner, not only a victim, just a victim of Russian aggression, as Kremlin and some people in Ukraine want us to be, but we know that we invest 5% into defense, and not all the members of NATO provide such big money in such big percent of their budget. So we have a unique army with great experience, because they counteract Russian aggression daily. Glory to Ukraine, glory to our servicemen, and we should be considered as partners. We are contributors. We are not just defending NATO in the East, defending European Union. There should be consensus and stability in Ukraine, and the increase of public opinion and the acceleration of the pace of reforms, because the law on national security and defense is really important. And it is great that in the parliament we have a group of deputies who work in order to submit the package of draft laws to implement the law on national security. And on the 17th of September in Parliament, this group will present this document, the key documents, to show that we want that we want to show that our that we meet the requirements of NATO. So this is parliamentary control over special services. The draft law is developed, and also my favorite topic is the reform of SBU. And unfortunately, there are ambitions and plans to adopt the law on national security, to start the reform of SBU, and to take out the non-appropriate functions of this organization, but it didn't take enough votes. And if you demand this adoption of law, including SBU, so this law wouldn't be passed. And now we need this law on SBU, the law on intelligence service, the access to state secret and transparency in the sector of military complex. So these billboards with the advertisement of the election figures, they should confirm their intention that they want to see Ukraine in Europe. So they should work, they should vote for laws. And when we have the next NATO summit, we should confirm our aspirations by our proper steps. We should make some progress in this area. So to those populists, because everything looks perfect on billboards, but maybe 5 votes will be lacking to support some law or on security or on defense. So our partners on Bucharest, in Bucharest, when Ukraine was closer to the plan of actions, a member action plan, we do not want to, you know, that inside of Ukrainian politics there were pro-power forces that at closed meetings with some ministers of foreign affairs, when they were asked whether they want Ukraine to become the member, they said that we are not ready, and this was the policy of double standards. And these officials, they provided misunderstanding, and it was used by those partners who used these discrepancies inside. So, summing up, it is really important for us to provide irreversibility, stable course to NATO, and the Parliament should adopt laws on implementation of law of national security, and to send proper signals to society. And the citizens, on the background of this aggressive pro-Russian propaganda that goes from Russian media channels that speaks about non-aligned status. But you know that our non-aligned status didn't save us from Russian tanks. So all those who said that non-aligned status would prevent this aggression, these advocates of non-aligned status, such as First President Kravchuk, he says now the different story. So there shouldn't be political amnesia, and people should remind to people who is who, because a politician cannot say for 10 years that he is against NATO, and now he sees that this opinion of people changed, and he just changed like a chameleon his views. And in the case of revanche, he would say, maybe we will agree with Russia and may become a non-allied state. So this scenario can be different, and we should take this into account. So I call on Ukrainian media to explain to people who is who in the issues of Euro-Atlantic integration in Ukraine, and clearly understand how to move further. And to sum up, the government should more efficiently work, not only, I speak to Ivan Klimpush-Tsetsadze, but to other people, because there is a special office on the European Atlantic integration, and we worked in on the Committee of Foreign Affairs, so office does really a lot. But other ministries also should join, and they should implement yearly program and strategic defense bulletin. So this should be synchronized work of all the ministries in order that we use properly trust funds and deliver proper information campaign, especially in Odessa Oblast, Mykolaiv and Khersonsk Oblast. These are pain points because there is toxic Russian propaganda on the background of economic blockade and the threat of unemployment because of the situation in the Azov Sea. So there can be a reverse trend. And you know that this is really important. And in Soviet times, in Soviet Ukraine, there were many different terror stories, and our neighbors, Poland, Czech Republic, the Baltic states, they became NATO members, and people started to change their views on NATO. But also, I am as a member of committee, I see that in many countries there is a big Russian lobby that is really influential, and they try to provide some to create some problems in these countries. And the last example of blocking in Gorshina to provide the program of expanded opportunities to Ukraine at the last summit of NATO. We didn't even ask for MAP, and so this shows that Hungary, in this case, they play for Kremlin. And I'm not even saying about their aspirations for autonomy in Zakarpattia, and depending on the results of his elections in 2019, the Kremlin will use Zakarpattia and the Hungarian community in Ukraine in their games. And in 2020, there will be 100 years of the Tehran Agreement, and Hungary, they have some aspirations for establishment of the Great Hungary, and we should act proactively. And some political technologists in Kremlin, they believe that there should be several Ukraines, and except the Azov Sea, there's also sensitive Zakarpattia issues. So we should be proactive, we should counteract the threats in Ukraine, and to fix those positive trends that we have concerning NATO and the European Union, despite those difficult trends in the EU. And I have an optimistic view. We should work on these issues. Thank you. Thank you, Hanna, for your views.
Thank you, Ms. Hanna, for your accents, for your important opinions. You told about the non-reversal trend. So the government will set the course of our movement. We want it to be stable, and we want no revision of the course to see, and the national consensus to support NATO is important. Then our opponents will not dare to fight against our NATO accession. I hope we have the time for a round of questions and answers. Good afternoon, Valery Kravchenko, expert on national security. I have several remarks. I would like to thank you for this research. It is large, and you have put good efforts, but we are against populism. You see it on the banner, the background. First, you make comparisons with 2012. It is wrong, because we have been living in the different countries since 2014. The East was Donetsk, Lugansk and Kharkiv regions in 2012, so the data are not relative. This is manipulation. The data on support to NATO, Lugansk, Kharkiv and Donetsk region in 2012, you compare them with today's data and get this picture we see on the screen. You put Dnipropetrovsk to the south of Ukraine, so do not manipulate data, because this is bad trend. The second, about the populism we are talking about progressions. We see that we have lost 5% of support. Some percent goes to non-aligned status, and some percentage goes to Russia, to the vector to Russia. We should say that this is our failure, and we should recognize that no Kremlin arm can justify our failure. 5.5% to defense and security sector funds. This is very low figure. The figures are not relevant. We cannot compare them and cannot be proud of them. Even Armenia provides 8% to the defense and security. The third remark is that we lack information. This is the reason, but also we lack results. We move towards NATO, but we do not have unity in support from NATO members to Ukraine. Many countries are again, there is no unity inside of NATO, so we are set the tasks which we cannot achieve. That is why this is the reason of apathy in our society. So both NATO and Ukraine should work to generate new cooperation formats which will fit the new reality in Ukraine, such as the war in the east of Ukraine and the support to pro-Russian forces in Odessa. So sometimes it seems that if populists say glory to Ukraine, they will be supported. As to 5%, if we do not communicate to our society that our billions of spendings to our defense, then populists will say why we do not use money for a higher pension benefits. Some portion of our funds, they go to the defense sector. That is why we cannot raise the retirement benefits amounts. Some journalists, they say on air, why do you compare our 130 billions to those of the US spending? Populists may come tomorrow and say that we should raise pensions and salaries, but then we will not spent for the defense sector. I agree to all your constructive recommendations. We should use them, and I agree with you that we have apathy in Ukraine. Georgia also experienced that when MAP has not been granted, so the population got into apathy. Of course, the governmental policy should be built so that after the overestimated, after the high expectations, the apathy would not come. Well, as concerns the initiatives, first, as to the regional dynamics, I will look onto this. I didn't work in the fund those days. Maybe there were differences and maybe the methodology changed, but they should have been they should influence only on regional level. But here you see the weighted average indicator, so this graph is not influenced anywhere because this is the average weighted indicator for Ukraine nationwide. So of course no opinion polling in the past, it had influence on the results of our opinion polling. So this is what we have. As to the minor changes in the eastern vector, this change is irrelevant. Talking about theoretical error, it is within it, so 3.2%, and it can even be up to 8% according to the methodology. So the fall from 47, this fall is obvious, but compared to May, it is statistically insignificant. We cannot see it as a fall, but as we compare with June, we can see some kind of fall. But as compared to last year, in southern regions, there is some change. 40% in 2018 are ready to take part in the referendum on NATO issues, and now they are 60% who are ready to go to the referendum. So maybe some mobilization takes place there. Thank you very much for your thorough reading of our report. Valentin Torbadin, the newspaper, when you talked about 2012 and about the regional breakdown in 2002, George Robertson and Yevgen Marchuk came to Donetsk. On their visit to Donetsk, there was those the tragedy on the Sadka mine, and George Robertson is a Scottish from miners region. They went to the church and prayed for the deceased miners. And I am from Lugansk, and there was no irritation among citizens in Lugansk. No negative attitudes were among Lugansk miners towards NATO. So statistics can be demonstrated in any way. There is objective reality. There are facts. How you communicate information, you get the results according to the quality of your communication. After Kuchma visit to Putin, to Kremlin, to Crimea, there was a meeting with Putin here, and the course changed. Our power, our regime is sincere. For many years, we have not had the official representative to NATO. Not for 1, not for 2 years. We had only an acting representative to NATO. This is the first thing. The second, do we need the changes to the constitution? We have been working on our constitution like a surgeon on a human body. The constitution should not be changed in the times of war. If we change constitution, then we recognize that we are not in the status of war. So to adapt to NATO, we have enough documents. Poland, only 30% consistent with NATO standards, but it is a member of NATO. So maybe this is, where did you take this figure? When I was to Brussels, I found this figure. I was told this figure when I was on my visit to Poland, that Poland is only 30% consistent with NATO standards. So Ms. Hanna said to us, we are the country in the warfare, and we have so high standards now. Our hybrid, we have been fighting, we have been fighting in the hybrid war. Unfortunately, we should end our briefing. The Yalta European Strategy Forum will soon be held in the nearest days, and various ex-general secretaries and country leaders will gather. It will be a kind of Vanity Fair. Many leaders, they try to bring Ukraine to various areas. Many of the scanning people, when they were prime ministers, they did not visit Ukraine. For example, Cameron, the prime minister of Great Britain, but he comes, he visits Pinchuk's events for high fees now. So we now set other criteria to oligarchs. Let's look on the contact of TV channels who serve our oligarchs. They covered the movement of Ukraine as good in order to demonstrate how oligarchs are good. We do not see the GDP growth being ordinary people. In 2016 and 2017 we had the GDP of 3.2, but this is not covered on the oligarchic TV channels, so nobody sees that the country has positive development. So the Vanity Fair on Yes meeting will be soon held. Nobody wants to be honest. Nobody wants to talk honestly with Western politicians. As concerns Ambassador Mr. Nestaika, we sent letters to the presidential administration that there is no ambassador of Ukraine to NATO, so this was really procrastination in Ukraine's policy. We could have started the autocephaly movement far earlier. In 2015-2016, the MAP could have been adopted. We did not have even the chief of the reconnaissance of the intelligence service, foreign intelligence service. So we need good institutions with high capacity, but for 4 years we have been cleaning the ranks of our security services from the spies. So there were very complicated process that we have been experiencing. We continue building our institution, building their capacities, and analyzing the cunning nature of our politicians. Katerina Zaremba, New Europe, sent a short question to Ms. Hanna Hopko. Thank you for your speech. This set of the package which you mentioned, when it will be ready and submitted to the parliament. We know that some parts of it are in the parliament for 2 years, and as concerns counteracting the hybrid threat, what actions have already been implemented? Today, in August, the first draft law on intelligence has been discussed at the meeting with the NATO office representatives present at that meeting. It has been discussed with the members of our Defense and Security Council. And tomorrow we will also discuss the concept, the vision with the NATO and Oversight Committee. There are several visions as of today how the committee should look like, the Oversight Committee. As concerns the reform of the security service, of the intelligence service, there are several draft laws already registered in the parliament with different views on how to combat corruption and espionage. Rand Corporation in 2016 conducted the research how to, for example, reduce the number of security service agents and how to counteract treason. I think that by the end of September, mid-October, various working groups will bring it to final version, this draft law. And also it will be submitted then to the presidential administration to be signed by the president. This also depends on the public opinion. Mass media, social, our public pressure. We cannot wait from the summit to the summit to take some strategic important decisions. Thank you, Ms. Hanna. Thank you for coming. And I would like to answer in short. The platform is 2 years old. It started in 2016 at Warsaw Summit. As concerns the actions, there are two areas. Participation of Ukrainian experts in platform events. Last year and at the beginning of this year, two important conferences took part in Lithuania. The conferences discussed the counteraction to the hybrid war. Important experts and Ukrainian experts also take part in the activities of the International Center combating hybrid warfares in Vilnius. Specific projects are discussed there which are of interest to our alliance partners and the EU partners. As concerns Ukrainian side, we have been developing 8 to 9 projects. We cannot say we have very good results, but some projects concerning the Ministry of Defense and the Security Service of Ukraine, we have positive dynamics in the Ministry of Defense. This is the military experts, aspects of counteractive hybrid aggression, and in the Security Service Academy, we have been realizing, implementing also the project 1 minute. In Poland, 5% of population do not know that Poland is a NATO member. 70% is the readiness of Poland at the moment of its accession to NATO. So the numbers a little bit differ. Of course, 100% compatibility should be attained by the country by the moment of accession. The criteria are were a little bit lower for Ukraine. We should attain the criteria which will allow us to access NATO. The time will come when political decision will be passed to allow Ukraine to become the member of NATO. Please go to the website of Democratic Initiatives Foundation. There you can see our report of our sociological poll. Thank you.